And when you're at the beginner phase, everything's new and exciting, and you really don't have any kind of benchmark. So you're not really judging yourself yet. You're just doing and learning, which is exciting and awesome. Then you start to get a little more information, and now you can be discerning. And now people judge themselves when they get to that discerning point where, oh, I don't know anything, and this is terrible. And who do I think I am? Who am I kidding? I can't do this. I don't have any talent. And most people quit at that second step.
Alrighty, it is time to stop hitting snooze and awaken to a life worth being, the fun and inspiring podcast that dives deep into what makes life truly fulfilling. I'm your host, Sue Willoughby, a self-proclaimed badass transformational life coach for women over 40. Join me as I explore the extraordinary journeys of ordinary people who've transformed their lives from the inside out. Tune in weekly to uncover the secrets to smashing through your perceived limits and creating a life that's not just well lived, but totally worth being. Welcome to today's episode of A Life Worth Being. I'm really excited to have my guest here, Alicia Tormey. She is an internationally recognized artist. She is an arts educator, and she's also a creative mentor. She is also a dear, dear friend and has been a huge positive influence on my life and an inspiration. Alicia, welcome.
Thank you for that lovely introduction.
You're so welcome.
I'm excited to be here.
Good. Well, I mentioned that you have been a huge positive influence in my life, and I'd like to kind of bring that into our discussion today.
Okay.
So, first of all, I'd like to know a little bit more about you, about how you came to be an artist, because a life of fine arts is not an easy choice.
It's true. It's not an easy choice. I've been a creative professional for about 35 years,
Wow.
and it's taken on a variety of different forms. But I am a fine arts painter. I specialize in encaustic painting, and I also really enjoy sharing my creative skills with other artists and other creatives who wish to grow. And you're right about it not being an easy road, but I was really born a creative. So I really hate to just put that out there like that, because it seems like either you have it or you don't. Because that isn't the case. Creativity is something that can be cultivated and nurtured. But I definitely had a pretty heavy dose right out of the gate. So I've always been in the arts and creative work. And for the last 25 years or so, I've primarily been a fine artist and making a life and a living out of that.
Mhm.
And it's been really exciting and really fun.
That's cool. I love that. That you said that you're either born an artist or you're not. That I think we all have some sort of creative spirit, and I think sometimes it gets kind of squashed out of us when we're kids.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you mentioned that you're an encaustic painter. Now, not everyone knows what encaustic art is. Can you briefly tell us a little bit about
Sure.
encaustic art and encaustic painting?
Yeah, so encaustic is actually painting with beeswax, but it's not just straight beeswax. It's beeswax that's been blended with a natural tree sap called damar. So this tree sap or natural resin actually makes that wax much harder and elevates the melting temperature. So some people get squeamish when I start explaining encaustic, and they hear the word wax and they think it's just this super fragile, ephemeral work that's going to melt away. But because of that introduction of the resin, it's actually super durable. And this painting method dates back thousands of years. The ancient Greeks first used encaustic to decorate their warships.
Wow.
So they were using pigmented beeswax and the resin and pigment, or, wax, resin, and pigment. And it just wasn't that much of a leap to start using it on other materials and using it as an art form. The Egyptians adopted encaustic as well. And so some of the oldest known encaustic artwork is about 3,000 years old
Wow.
from the Egyptians,
Interesting.
from the Fayum Valley, where they would use encaustic to make what is called a Fayum mask.
Okay.
And so these encaustic portraits would be painted of someone in life. And then once that person passed on, this portrait would be placed over the face of their mummy like a mask.
Wow.
And so some of these Fayum masks have survived over the centuries and centuries. And so when people talk about feeling a little squeamish about how fragile encaustic might be, I just remind them, there's encaustic paintings in existence today that are 3,000 years
Wow.
old.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And, I think, well, I know how you talk about the difference between painting with wax and painting with other medium, like
Yes.
acrylics. And so what's
So encaustic isn't like any other traditional medium where you're working wet and dry.
okay.
With encaustic, you're working hot and cold. Because it has that wax base, it has to be heated to be liquefied in order for you to use it like a paint material. But then at room temperature, it quickly resolidifies. So encaustic artists do have to work with some focus and urgency in order to get the material down. And then you have to reintroduce heat in order to melt it to your substrate. So I use a blowtorch to re-liquefy the material and move it around on the surface and create my work that way.
Wow, that's pretty cool. And I think it's hard to grasp that concept without seeing it visually. And I know that you have a lot of examples of your work and your process on your Instagram. So we'll get to that later in the and we'll give them that information so they can come see what it looks like in person, because I think that's really cool.
Thanks.
So you mentioned that you've been a working artist for what, 35 years? Yeah. Back to our initial discussion or mention of inspiration. How do you stay inspired to continue creating over such a long period of time?
It's interesting because this question comes up a lot for me, and I think that there's a difference between inspiration
Mm-hmm.
and motivation.
Okay.
And I think that those two things are critical to maintaining a passion
Mm.
and maintaining a focus over an extended period of time, like 35 years.
Yeah.
And part of what motivates me is being able to help other artists and other people and seeing them transform. Um, that is something that has really helped keep me going and inspired me to make an impact.
Mm-hmm.
I reached a point in my career where it wasn't just about making art and selling art,
Mm-hmm.
because there's certainly a lot of that goes on. But when I realized I could really make this positive impact on other creatives, that became the motivation. And that became the catalyst for pushing forward and pushing out and getting bigger, having a bigger dream. Because it just came down to thinking about what's my legacy and what can I do that's going to contribute to my greater community. And so that became my motivation and my inspiration.
To become an art educator.
Yes, to extend beyond just making my own work and showing other artists how to fully step into their own creative practice.
How do you do that? I mean, well, because like you said, I think that, someone is thinking about being an artist, or they're like, I really would love to express myself creatively through painting or whatever, but I don't know where to start, or I feel like I've never done this before. How do people come to you, and how do you help them find their motivation and their inspiration?
Well, I think that, back to what we said in the beginning about creativity and, to be human is to be creative. And I'm always surprised when I hear people say, "Oh, I don't have a creative bone in my body," but they're actually, just living as a human is a creative process. But a lot of creative people will come to me who don't feel like they're worthy of the title artist, or who feel like they need some formal permission or education or training before they could step into that identity. And for those starting who are feeling the impulse to create, who feel that kind of fire in the belly, like I know I have these things I want to say and do and create, I just don't know how to take the next step into motivation or action. And I say first and foremost, follow your curiosity,
Let's do this. Yeah.
because curiosity is always going to lead you into new directions, and it'll create an experience for you where you are constantly trying and experimenting new things. And that's where that personal evolution starts, is if you're trying things and you're experimenting and you're not afraid to go into new areas. Because another thing that adult humans don't like to do is they don't like to be a beginner.
No.
And whenever you try something new, you're a beginner.
Yes.
And when it comes to art, or really learning any new skill, but especially when it comes to art and new techniques and new mediums, you're always going to start at that 0 point at a beginner's mind. But it is that exact point in that beginner's mind where you open up and you really start, if you allow yourself to just be a beginner and take it in.
That's so easy to say. Well, when you talk, I mean, when you think about, okay, being a beginner as an adult, right? You are afraid. I think fear is huge, right? And you're afraid to be a beginner. You're afraid to like have people go, "Oh my God, that is the ugliest piece of artwork I've ever seen." Cares, right? People are afraid to be messy. I think, especially like you said, when they're starting something, it's messy and it's not perfect, and not that there's any such thing as perfection, but I mean, do you find that when your students come to you, you're kind of dealing with all of that?
Oh, 100%. So that's really interesting that you have that observation too, because most artists, and you could insert any specialty, replace the word artist with photographer, writer, chef, whatever it is you want to put in there. 90% of people quit because the initial part is ugly. And you are learning. And when you're at the beginner phase, everything's new and exciting, and you really don't have any kind of benchmark. So you're not really judging yourself yet. You're just doing and learning, which is exciting and awesome. Then you start to get a little more information, and now you can be discerning. And now people judge themselves when they get to that discerning point where, oh, I don't know anything, and this is terrible. And who do I think I am? Who am I kidding? I can't do this. I don't have any talent. And most people quit at that second step.
And like you said, that comes with everything, whether you're an artist, whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're whatever.
Yes,
It's like
exactly.
as soon as it gets to a point where, oh, I might have to put myself out there and people are going to see it. And then our inner critic comes up because we're anticipating the external critic.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, I've run into that myself.
Most people do.
So
And most people
I have
quit.
that. Right.
Most people quit. But I think understanding that this is, every single person goes through this step. And this is my turn. And yes, this is crap now, but the only way for me to create work that isn't crap is to just keep making work.
Yeah.
And like I said, whether you're cooking, whether you're writing, whether you're a photographer, a painter, a poet, whatever your creative pursuit is, there's such a identifiable series of phases that you go through to get to the level of mastery that most people aspire to. And in today's world where everything's so quick and we want that instant gratification, we also hold ourselves to that standard too. Like we think, oh, I'm going to read a book, I'm going to watch a YouTube video, and then I'm going to bang this out and be amazing.
Yeah.
And then when you're not, people think, okay, it wasn't amazing. I tried it. It wasn't amazing. I'm going to move on. Instead of actually digging down, following their curiosity, following their passions, doing it in spite of themselves, whether it's good or not, and allowing themselves that learning process where you go from beginner to amateur to layman to journeyman to master. It's a whole series that most human beings walk through whenever they're learning a new skill.
Anything, whether it's art or anything else.
Most people quit. And so the ones who don't quit are the ones who realize some measure of success, however large or small.
And you talked about in your long career that you got to a point where you realized, I'm not just an artist, I am like an artist's artist, where I can help other people on this journey and get them beyond that point when they might quit.
Exactly.
Did that just kind of come to you? Like, I see people struggling, I've struggled myself, I can help them get beyond that.
Yes. I could see myself in these struggling young artists. And when I say young artists, it has nothing to do with chronological age. And I could see myself in their frustration and their self-doubt. It's amazing how hard we are on ourselves, and particularly when it comes to creative work.
Mm-hmm.
And when an artist would come to me, and ask me questions, how did you do this, that, and the other thing, and I could see exactly their position because I had once been there.
Mm-hmm.
And I could also see that they don't know that there's a whole lineup of steps beyond where they're stuck, and that they're in the worst part right now, that beginning where you know enough to know you suck.
Yes.
But you don't have the confidence to move forward. And so that's when I began coaching and nurturing and sharing and teaching other artists, because I had so much empathy for them at that stage, because that is a very hard stage. And being able to really identify with that allowed me to nurture them out of that and into a place of being really creative and really abundant, and not moving forward with so much fear in their creative work.
Can you give me an example of either in your own personal life or with one of your students where you have really seen that shift, and what does it look like? And what does it feel like?
It's interesting. One person just popped into my head, and they were dealing with a lot of emotional trauma, and they were turning to art to heal.
Mm-hmm.
And they had come to me to learn my techniques with Encaustic. And I remember working with this person, and we spent a full day in the studio, and they still hadn't made one single mark on their panel. And I could just feel their hesitancy. I could feel their angst. I could feel there was so much bubbling up for them. So I just took a paintbrush and I splattered their panel. And as soon as I did that, they cracked open. They started painting. They were enjoying themselves. And so that was actually very rewarding. But the ironic thing about this person is they realized they knew that art was the way forward for them. And they actually went back and got a formal arts education after that. And they didn't end up being an encaustic artist. They're a fine oil painter, and they went from drawing stick figures to doing beautiful, expressive, really elegantly painted oil paintings. So they're an oil painter now.
So it's just a matter of they couldn't let go. Like even with the stick figures, I mean, you draw a stick figure, it's pretty rudimentary, right?
Yeah.
My mother used to say, I can't draw a straight line with a ruler. There are really no straight lines in art, Mom. That's okay. But it sounds like when this person just cracked open, it was like, oh, okay. That's amazing. I did get chills when you were talking about that because I could just feel how tightly they were holding on to all of that trauma and all of that stuff that they wanted to be able to express but weren't able to. Wow.
Yeah.
Incredible.
It was incredible. And yeah, their art art has a way of really quickly getting to emotional issues. Art and emotion are directly linked. And so for creatives who are really struggling, they can get bogged down by that emotional connection, or if somebody gives them the opportunity, they can be completely freed and opened up by it. It's really incredible.
That's interesting that you say that the art is like a metaphor or a mechanism for them to release. I noticed that in my coaching practice when someone walks into the presence of the horse, that it sort of cracks them open just because of the intuitive equine energy and wisdom, and just it's like it allows them to be themselves in that energy. So I can see where that would be sort of a weird. When you were talking about that, because I've seen people that's happened where they've just holding on to so much, and then they're in the presence of this other being. In your case, that being is the art.
Yeah, I love that. I totally see the parallel there. Yeah, that's fascinating.
That's cool. Why do you think, and this is sort of just a little gear shift here, why do you think people are drawn to encaustic?
Oh gosh. It's interesting because I can tell when somebody's really going to take this on for the long haul.
Because it's a lot.
It is a lot because it's a gear sport.
Yeah, it's
Because you are working hot and cold, you need hot appliances, you really need a designated workspace.
It's not like
it is a lot.
Easel and go sketch out in those,
But there's something primal about it. There really is. So, and encaustic appeals to all of your senses. It's very aromatic. Smells like beeswax. It just smells familiar and comforting. It's beautiful to work with, and you are working with it in a liquid and a solid. So it's constantly changing state.
It's got a life of its own.
Oh,
I mean, when I see you work with the blowtorch and moving the wax around on the canvas or on the board, it's just like, wow, it is like a living being.
Absolutely, it is alive, and yeah. And then it's translucent, so it reflects light in such a beautiful way, unlike any other media. It feels lovely when it's cool and you can touch it. It just appeals to all of your senses. So for some creatives, I feel like I hear many artists say, I have been looking for this all my life. This is the medium I have been seeking, because of the different properties when compared to a traditional medium. And encaustic allows you to make some pretty interesting work fairly quickly. And you can move quickly through those stages of development. Everybody gets stuck at that early second stage. But with encaustic, you can move pretty quickly through a lot of these trickier developmental phases.
I mean, just in the creative process.
Yes. Now, it's very technical, and it takes a long time to actually master it. But I feel like
it's almost like a recipe.
No, almost out of the gate, you can create some pretty interesting work just because it's wax and it's yummy, and you've got.
I like that word, yummy.
Yummy.
It is pretty yummy. And for those of you who are watching on YouTube, this yummy painting behind us is one of Alicia's originals, and we'll try and put some, like I said, When you see her on Instagram, you'll see just how yummy her work really is.
Thank you so much.
It is yummy. I love that word though. That's like a perfect description of it. So I like that. People are drawn to it because can appeal to the creative and sort of the technical piece of it, even though
Absolutely,
it's
yes.
not purely like, a scoop of this and a scoop of that, apply some heat and you've got a, beautiful painting.
Right.
But there is some technical finesse to it.
There, technical finesse. I like that.
Yeah.
I just recently wrapped up a retreat, and I had 3 PhDs in this last retreat group.
Uh-huh.
Oh,
Speaking of technical.
I've never had that, but so I had all of these left brainers
Yeah.
who were really drawn to this particular method of painting.
Mm-hmm.
And it really does fully occupy both hemispheres of your brain. It is very technical, but it is also very creative.
So they embrace the journey.
Yes.
Creative journey.
Yes.
Do you see that like in a retreat like that when you do have somebody that tends to be a little bit more left-brained than right-brained, do you see a bigger transformation between those people and the people that come there that may already have some sort of creative painting background?
Well, the interesting thing, so Encaustic is so unique among art mediums that even classically trained artists and artists with pretty strong skill set, Encaustic humbles you when you're learning it. And for an accomplished, seasoned artist to come to a medium where they're forced into that beginner mind is actually really liberating.
Interesting.
And so I see a similar transformation between someone who's already trained or really creative and already practicing and someone who's very curious and learning for the first time. There's a similar transformation, but they get there from different angles.
That's cool. That's interesting. I haven't thought about that. You would think like, oh, well, I'm already an artist in my own right, and I paint in oils or whatever. So how hard can this be?
Exactly. And that's not an uncommon mindset, but
like you said, it humbles.
It does.
It humbles you.
It still humbles me, all these decades later, but which is why I still do it. Like, it's so captivating and it's always teaching me something. And artists who are coming to it from a different discipline, some things translate, like composition, color theory, things like that, but everything else goes out the window because, again, we're working hot and cold, liquid, solid, not wet and dry.
Yeah.
And so it just changes the whole approach. And when artists come and discover that, I just see them light up. And because they've kind of gotten stale in their practice. They know how to do it. They don't have to put much thought or effort into it. And Encaustic requires thought and effort constantly because you're using, I use a blowtorch, so I've got an open flame. I'm like present.
Sounds a little dangerous. Especially when you have a number of people in the same room.
Yeah. So it forces you to be present no matter what level you're at. So it's really an engaging material to work with.
Yeah. Yes, I can understand that. I mean, you can't doze off in the middle of a firing. Wow. So what would you, if you had someone that, they want to explore their artistic endeavor, it's just something that's, like you said, has been pulling at them. What is your biggest piece of advice to the would-be artist or the would-be creative?
I would say start now, because once people do finally take that leap and they get started, the first thing I hear from them is, I wish I had started this 10 years ago. And there's no better time like the present. And because some people can experience a lot of fear, like back to that student who I have to just splatter her panel so she could open up, that's a metaphor really for starting, period. And if you can just shatter all the false stories you're telling yourself, Let go of all the excuses, because that's the other thing I see a lot is creatives or people who feel this urge to be an artist or this desire to create. They say, oh, I wish I could, but I don't have enough time. I don't have enough money. I don't have enough space. And it's just a litany of excuses why they can't. And so the first thing I say is why
fear speaking.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So first of all, ask yourself different questions. Instead of I can't because, say I can if.
Or how can I?
And I can when, instead of I cannot because of. And probably the biggest reason is time. And I always say, you have time to be an artist. You have time to be a writer, whatever your real, true soul desire is, you can do it. And you have time and you have resources. You're just prioritizing something else over that. Because if you did a time audit and really looked hard and honestly at all the time leaks in your life, how much time are you spending watching Netflix and scrolling social media? Hours and hours and hours a day. And the average American gets 9 hours of screen time a day.
That's a lot.
That's a job.
You're waking. Yeah, that's
right?
A full-time job.
And so if you could take a fraction of that time and dedicate it to your creative pursuit or let's say passionate pursuit, because maybe it isn't art, maybe it's something else. That will accumulate, that will grow exponentially into something more meaningful when you prioritize it.
You have to do that. It's the same thing with meditation or anything like that. If you can set aside 5 minutes and then 10 minutes and then 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And then pretty soon you're like, oh, you look forward to that time because it's your time.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I love it. Alicia, thank you so much. I mean, we could go on and on and on. And I know that there's so many other layers of your artistic endeavors that we can talk about. So we may have to have you back to talk about some of those. But if someone is interested in finding out more about you and about your art, how can they get in touch with you and how can they find you?
I love to hear from artists and creatives, and you can find me on Instagram at alicia.tormey, and my website's aliciatormey.com.
Great.
And you could just pop that into Google and lots of things will pop up for you to explore.
Alicia Keys, Alicia Tormey. Well, it's really been a pleasure talking with you today. I so much appreciate your time. I so much appreciate your generosity with your community. I mean, and you really have built an amazing community. I will say that. Not just artists, I think just your positivity and the support that you give people by just being present is amazing. So
thank you so much for
true.
saying that. Really appreciate that.
It's true, though. I mean, you just have a way about you that makes people feel good about themselves and good about what they're doing, and it's encouraging. So thank you for being here. I really appreciate that.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It's an honor to be here, and I look forward to coming back.
And I'll put Alicia's contact information in the show notes. And thank you so much for being here today. I appreciate you.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of A Life Worth Being. I hope you found it fun and inspiring. And to avoid a bad case of FOMO, please be sure to click that subscribe button. If you love what you heard today, please share it with a friend and then hop on over to your favorite podcast platform and return the love with a wonderful review and 5-star rating. It would truly mean the world to me. Be sure to follow me on Instagram and on my website, links below in the show notes. I appreciate you, and I will see you next week for more fresh insights on awakening a life worth being.